Welcome to 160 Studios. I'm Holly Scott. Today I have the distinct pleasure of chatting with industry executives, specifically around a topic of much discussion. On November 13th, the Biden administration signed into effect an initiative led by First Lady Jill Biden and the White House Gender Policy Council to focus specifically in women's health research. This is a significant undertaking and a first in history where the White House has taken action to look specifically on the chronically underfunded area of women's health and women's health research. Based on where we sit and as an organization, this information hit me in a powerful way as we hear about corporate decisions, investment decisions, and the struggles of innovation, and specifically that of those focused in the women's health sector. Although women make up half the workforce, make up half the population, I should say, and 92% of the household decisions are made by women, investment trends in medtech are still fairly small, hovering at around 4% overall. So I am grateful to have four speakers who know much more about this area than I do to help us all understand better what's going on in the marketplace today. And I'd like to take a minute to introduce them. Today I have Neda Hanafi. She's a senior VP at Veranex. She's former NIH senior scientific advisor to the Office of Research on Women's Health at NIH, as well as she has 10 plus years of leadership at FDA. She's the co-founder and board director of MedTech Color. I also have Amanda De Palma, the senior VP of marketing at Siemens. She's the chair of the Women's Executive Network at AdvaMed. AdvaMed happens to be MedTech industry's largest trade advocacy organization, and she sits on the board of MedTech Women. We also have Marissa Fair. Marissa is a champion for women's health as the CEO of Deep Look Medical, the CEO of nonprofit Her Health EQ, and a partner at Goddess Gaia Ventures. And lastly, we have Liz Powell. Liz is the founder of G2G Consulting. She is an advocate for women's health, and Liz serves on the steering committee for the Innovation Equity Forum, led by the NIH Office of Research on Women's Health. She also leads the G2G Women's Health Advocates and helped launch the Women's Health Innovation Coalition. So once again, thank you all for participating in this conversation. We're so glad to have you help us understand what's happening as it's taking place. If we could, let's start with Liz, please. Liz, could you help us understand a little more about this initiative and what it may mean?
Sure. Thank you so much. First, it's very exciting. It brings national attention to this issue by coming from the White House. And what happened was Dr. Jill Biden wanted to make women's health research a priority, and she teamed up with the Gender Policy Office to talk to different agencies within government to find out what are they doing to address women's health research gaps. And as they started to talk with agency, they realized there was a real need. We also met with them throughout the past several months with various women's health oriented organizations, eager to gather information from perspective outside of government. And all of that culminated in this new directive. So the agencies, federal agencies, have 45 days to get back to the White House, to Dr. Biden's team, on what the agencies are doing to address women's health research gaps. And with that information, we believe they will come out with more details on what this initiative will do. So it's a really exciting opportunity to bring together a lot of experts in this space to contribute to that. And I have to say, in meetings and conversations I've had with folks behind this effort, they are very eager for input. So I hope everyone listening today will provide input, because your voice matters in this effort, and there's many in the ecosystem shaping women's health research.
That's excellent to know, and we certainly want to provide opportunity for individuals, corporations, any stakeholders that are listening to follow up and take action as we continue with this conversation. That's a great place to start. Amanda, as you sit within industry as well as a key component of AdvaMed, you must be following this closely.
Yeah, and Holly, first of all, thanks for having this conversation and really beginning a dialogue to help educate, generate awareness, and help us in industry know how we can plug into this opportunity. I think, the voice I want to bring here is how do we as industry, many of us who may not know a lot about Washington and about how initiatives such as this work, how can we, it's kind of a little spark of hope. We've all in industry been working towards partnering with clinicians to generate better outcomes. We know for years that women's have responded different to different therapies, that we have different, if you look at cardiovascular care, if you look at diabetes, we respond differently to these conditions and to the therapies that are being developed to address them. So how do we as industry get a better understanding of the opportunity here, and how can we, when you look at this initiative and see 20 agencies that are involved, how do we pull together and bring the minds and the knowledge that we have to drive the change that we've been trying to push for so long? From an AdvaMed standpoint, I'll speak on behalf of Tracy McNeil. Tracy is the CEO of Materna Medical, who is focused on women's health, and also a director on the board at AdvaMed. And she is leading the Women's Health Equity Initiative within AdvaMed with Deidre Washington and Deshawn Dorsey. And that initiative specifically is looking at 3 pillars. One is awareness. How are we developing the business case for women's health equity? And how are we setting a goal to increase investment in women's health research and technology? Access, how are we improving care for women? And I think there's going to be an investment of around $200,000 in research specifically to show the gaps in funding and coverage that exist, particularly in underrepresented women. And then research diversity. Women have been intentionally excluded because of some of the differences that we have in hormones and pregnancy, which is exactly why we need to have research conducted specifically for our bodies and our outcomes. And so I think with AdvaMed's help and the partnerships across clinicians, researchers, and industry, how can we pull together to turn this from just a very large initiative into the action that we need to see to improve women's health outcomes?
Great. Yeah, and I'm going to turn to Marissa on this because I've heard her share the idea in the past. Let's zoom out for a minute, because sometimes the audience and some individuals in the audience may be hearing women's health and thinking, is that exclusively OBGYN? Is that exclusively, what are we talking about here? And even as a woman, as an executive, it took me a little while to understand the dynamic differences between what we're focusing on. Marissa, could you give us a little color on what women's health really means, big picture, so we can zoom back in and talk more about this initiative?
For sure. So women's health is the health of a woman in particular. It's not just bikini medicine, and put the visual in your head of what a bikini is, and where it sits. It's not just that. So it's not just breast health. It's not just OBGYN. It's full body health for a woman. Amanda was saying in the statement that Tracy was saying, women are disproportionate, just have different effects because of different health areas, different drug effects, et cetera. We don't study them, and with it, we don't research them. There's no benchmarks. There's no traction in the industry. So, if we haven't done any studies to see how women are affected differently by a drug or by a health condition, women present differently for heart attacks, even though it's the #1 killer of women. And so we don't know the differences, except a lot of it's, there's a little bit of study that's been happening, and it's anecdotal. And so why do Black women have far more aggressive breast cancer variations than other people? So that needs to be studied. So when we talk about women's health, it's literally, from the tippy top of your head to your toes. It's everything affecting a woman's health. It's not just pregnancy. It's not just fertility. It's not just OBGYN. It is literally everything affecting a woman from from top to bottom, but also for her entire life cycle. And so women have a lot of life cycles that happen far more differently than men do, which includes, puberty everybody goes through. Women obviously have, the childbearing years. And then every single woman, no matter what, it just happens, we all go through menopause. We don't have
it's just completely separate. So there's perimenopause as you're going through it. There's postmenopause once you've actually gone through it. So we have all these different phases of life that haven't been studied, are completely different, than the other gender, and they need to be studied appropriately. And that's kind of when it was kind of a really big picture when the White House of all places said, oh, we should focus on women's health because us in the women's health industry talk about it all the time. And, we're pushing a rock uphill, and, and maybe it'd be nicer to be pushing a rock on a flat, on a flat landscape instead of just completely up a hill. And so women's health is literally anything having to do with a woman in any life cycle she is, and also wherever she happens to live, in the US we're talking about, but also on a global perspective, and it changes differently.
No, it's such an important point that it's not exclusively the women's physical differences. It's how we present with clinical disorders, how we react to treatments, how we manifest in diseases and such. So yeah, this is a huge initiative. And as someone who sits in industry like I do, I have seen historically how challenging it is for organizations that are, especially on the startup side, labeled women's health. They do have a lot more explaining to do. So hopefully this call can help our market understand why this is so incredibly important. Ned, I'd love to hear, especially from your perspective, I mean, former NIH, FDA, and now sitting in the middle of industry, what are you thinking about as you're hearing more about this initiative?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Holly. And just to echo what everyone said, it is exciting and it's about time, right? And just to underscore the switch from women's health to the health of women. So as everyone said, women have historically been underrepresented in clinical studies, in research, and due to the uniqueness of being a woman. I think we've shifted and grown from the fact that women aren't little men, and you need to take their unique health situation beyond just body, hormonal, etc., into account as you're developing technologies and products to address their unique needs. You said it, Holly, women tend to be the chief clinical officers for their family. They're the key decision makers. And the social determinants of health come into play as well in terms of how we access healthcare, how we can participate in clinical research, if we're even offered to participate in clinical research. So there's a lot of different pieces that come into play here. And being in the medical device realm, we're talking about research into key areas that impact women. There's the women-specific diseases, but then there's also diseases where women present differently or they disproportionately impact women in a different manner. But then how do we translate that research into actual solutions and technologies that are going to lead to the better outcomes we're seeking here? But you've got to take a more holistic picture to what I was saying in terms of how we access the social determinants of health, how they come into play. And different groups, even though we're not little men, we're not all the same. And the racial and ethnic background has to come into play here in terms of even how disease manifests, and how early on we might be able to detect a disease. So there's the whole holistic picture of women. And then to Marissa's point, at the different life stages that we go through, that will need to come into play to develop real unique solutions that address our unique needs at different stages in our life. So I think overall it's exciting. There's a lot to think about here. And how do we take this initiative to really drive better outcomes for women? Because that's what we're all seeking in the healthcare space.
Better outcomes. And also the investors need to keep in mind that women still have the longevity factor too. So when we're thinking about lifetime of care, we're thinking about all the different the therapies, the diagnoses, and the treatments that go into a lifetime of care and prevention, there's a lot of opportunity there. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity. So, okay, so we know about this initiative. We're all excited about it. I know I was when I read about it, I thought, okay, so what does this really mean? And I know, Liz, you commented a bit on it. I'd like to, if you don't mind, perhaps go a little bit deeper. What is this 45-day window? Can you tell us more about what this is and what you would expect to happen from where you sit?
Yeah. And also just like to point out, not only could we improve the health outcomes of women, but we could improve them of men. Because think about what we could learn by studying women that could benefit men. Just wanted to add that in there. So the 45 days go up to December 28th, I believe. And that is a hard deadline for federal departments and agencies. But it is not a hard deadline for those of us who are not in government. So whether you're a VC, an entrepreneur, a physician, a researcher, working in health inequities, working in access to innovation, any part of that ecosystem, your voice is important and you should be contributing. I encourage you to contribute. And you can really do that, I think, effectively through January, because it will be so close to Christmas. I don't imagine they're going to solve this problem between Christmas and New Year's. So you do have time to submit after that. And the information that they're looking for from federal departments and agencies is, what are you doing to address women's health research now? What are the gaps? What are your recommendations for addressing those gaps? That's what they're tapping the agencies for. So if you're on the other side, then think about what recommendations you would make. What gaps do you see? Because I'm sure there's going to be some blind spots as they're gathering that information. So that's where I think all of our voices come in.
That's extremely helpful. So the individuals that are spearheading this effort and answering that question, say within NIH, are speaking to the research and the focus exclusively within their area today, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
So innovative partners, if I'm thinking back to the industry, the industry, the ones that would be closest to federal money or federal resources would likely be the ones that would have the most visibility to what's happening on these in these particular areas, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very
Okay.
helpful.
Okay. So if we could take it just a step deeper, if we're thinking about the support that our sector, that the public and private sector within the med tech community could offer from the innovative circles, where you sit, you read and you hear a lot of these suggestions. Do you have any recommendations on content and format that would carry a stronger message for, let's just use perhaps Marissa as an example, CEO of Her Healthy Q, a nonprofit, or maybe even Deep Look, if you wanted to put Deep Look's story in the middle. And again, just using it as an example, are there tangible measures that you would suggest to someone to make a case that would be heard in a stronger way?
It's a great question. So what I'm encouraging folks I'm working with is, I think it should be on letterhead. There are some instances where it's very powerful to just send it as Deep Look, for example. And then there's other cases where it's powerful to put some logos together, like American Medical Women's Association with Society for Women's Health Research, for example. I'm just putting out examples.
Mm-hmm.
So there are times when you want to have several co-sign a letter together, and then there's other times when you send it on your own. And I think the format that is most powerful is to start out with background on the gaps, on the problems, offering statistics to the best we can, share that data, and then list out what are the recommended changes to make. And, sky's the limit. I wouldn't be limited by our current structure. Throw out ideas that are a little crazy, a little creative, because that's the only way we're really going to shift the paradigm. And I also would not make it too long, just a few pages. Do not send 10, 20 pages. I don't think that they will have time to read comments if they all come in at that length. So those would be my pointers.
That's excellent. That's incredibly helpful. Again, getting in the details and the tactics, that carries a lot of weight there. And then, getting back to the pillars that Amanda mentioned about this initiative, awareness, access, and diversity and research diversity. Those pillars, if we keep those front and center as you're thinking about your story to make, that likely would carry more weight and get more attention based on that initiative being a focus.
For sure. And Liz, who do we send these things to, as I've just taken notes?
There is actually a special inbox that they've created to take in these letters, comments. So I can share that with folks in whatever medium is most helpful.
That's terrific. In a perfect world, let me ask each of you this, and I'll go back to Ned on this one. In a perfect world, let's fast forward. Let's give them 90 days, because, you know, it is the government. Let's give it a little time, right? What would you like to see be stacked in terms of priority here? What are some things that you would love to see be in the works?
I'll put on my FDA hat, or ex-FDA hat, because we're talking about medical devices, and I think as just a person, you can come into medical devices a lot more than, say, get prescribed a drug or biologic. What I would really like to see is a big focus or a spotlight that expedites women's health products, health of women products, if we're talking about women-specific diseases and conditions, through the review process, reconsidering how we actually evaluate these products. The goal is safe and effective products to market in a least burdensome manner, first in the world of public health impact, using the words of FDA's mission, right? And how can we really lean into that and help a lot of innovators out there? There's a lot of folks working on developing really meaningful products from a lived experience for women. And when you innovate for women, I think you really need to innovate with empathy. So now, can we translate that to the regulatory body to mirror the urgency that's needed and help expedite that process? Reconsider the balance of pre and post-market data. Make sure it's safe and effective, but don't make it so burdensome that some of these smaller companies that, like you said, struggle to raise funds in this area are forced to shut down, right? So that we're working in tandem at this ultimate goal of improving health outcomes for women. That would be ideal for me. I mean, it's a big, broad, and you're going to have to break it down in the steps of doing that. But if there's a spotlight that says the health of women is a priority, as the White House has said, let's now figure out all the different stakeholders based on their roles and responsibilities to get innovative products to market, play so that we're all like rowing in the same direction and not limiting it. I also just wanted to say on the website, the White House website, there is a complete disinterest form that you can submit. It's very simple form, name, address, title, whatever, and what are your areas of interest. And to Liz's point, keeping it short and sweet. They're only giving you 250 words. So that's another way to also put your voice forward.
I love the visual of, I'm feeling the synergy with the breakthrough device designation or something along those lines. From a regulatory standpoint, it feels like that holistic approach to getting an expedited pathway to a market that clearly needs it, that shouldn't be so foreign to FDA. That seems like such a great idea.
Holly, you're hitting the nail on the head. I think not recreate the wheel again. Don't add a new whole system that someone has to get up to speed in doing. Work with our current systems and refine them. Make them a little bit more streamlined. Again, maybe just even putting the focus. The nice thing about breakthrough, FDA just included health equity. So if you have products that work to address health inequities or address a disease that disproportionately impacts a certain population, they're willing to look at that. They're also looking at products that might allow better access to care as a breakthrough technology. So just add in potentially women's health, right? And even maybe hone in on areas where we know women are impacted at a much higher rate, and fair works, right? So I think working within current working systems would be wonderful as like low-hanging fruit to jump on. But then maybe we can flesh it out even further. So I love the idea of the breakthrough. And they're not starting from scratch. FDA has a Health of Women program, CDRH, should I say, that's meant to focus on how to improve outcomes for women. So I think, again, they can work within their systems, and they potentially should be, and I'm assuming we are excited about this initiative and want to know how can we help support it.
Excellent.
And Holly, to add on to where Netta is going with that, because I think, how is industry, how do we focus? Is if we all run after many, many different solutions and just do a little bit of everything. I think what I'd like to see is what are the key areas that will affect the most women and improve outcomes, and how can we come together? And I think this is where AdvaMed has a unique ability to bring industry together to solve these big problems and move them forward in a meaningful way. So what are the big things that we can focus on? And then for this to be successful, the patients have to be aware. I think we talked at MedTech Vision in September that your zip code is often the determinant of your health outcomes. So it's great if we all do this as industry and researchers, but there's a lot of mistrust, and for good reason, among potential patient populations. So how do we make this simple for the potential patients to understand, to participate, so we can actually do the work to move this forward? You know, how do we break it down to a 22-page document with 20 agencies? How can we break it down to bringing people in that need to be a part of this, making it easy for them to understand, and building back the trust that needs to exist, I think, if we're going to do the work to truly improve outcomes.
And that point harmonizes so well with Netta's, you know, just let's keep it simple and effective, work with what works, massage it, what's not working, get what isn't being touched right now, pulled in and inclusive. That in itself could be a huge swing in the right direction.
And I think the other side is also to think about how do we commercialize some of these, you know, this research faster. One of the few good things that came out of the COVID pandemic was the NIH's RADx, rapid acceleration of diagnostic tests. All the diagnostic tests that we've been taking at home, most of them came out of that program, and I was honored to be part of it. It was almost like a Shark Tank. Like, it was very quick, very quick deliverables. I mean, the fact that diagnostic tests were able to get into people's hands within less than a year, all these agencies, everybody from private sector, public sector, working together to get this moving, like, it's a great model. So how do we get everything that has been now researched or will be researched that are creating the largest impact? How do we get that into everybody's hands? Because it's wonderful to have the research and the benchmarks, but then there's innovation that needs to get out much faster for women. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, from my perspective, that's, as an investor and as an entrepreneur and as an executive, like, that's what we want to see. We actually want the research actually to be done relatively quickly so that everybody can have more commercial opportunities in women's health for the best opportunity of products for an entire different population that probably does not have anything that serves their needs right now.
Oh, that's an excellent point too. And from the perspective of an investor as well, Marissa, I think that's really important. The reason that so many innovators, entrepreneurs, exit out of academia or government is because they need the resources and the pace. They want to get there faster. They want to make things happen. And when they tap the private sector, they typically can accelerate it. And that's just an incredibly important facet of this, is we can have all the best science in the world, but we got to get it in the hands of the people who need it.
And this is going to be a really big accelerant for the investment side of the market as well. So there's a lot of people looking at this, myself included, and a lot of my colleagues, that are looking to see where to invest more money in women's health based on some of these innovations and research that's going to come out.
Interesting. Well, that we had already offline discussed, we're going to need a follow-up to this, because this is an effort that we're all going to be closely watching. And the next 30, 45, 60 days will be really, really interesting. Before we close, though, I'd love to get any last statements. Liz, do you have anything else that you'd like to add on this initiative, or anything that perhaps our audience should be thinking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for our sort of women health advocates efforts, we are actually collecting ideas, not just for this White House initiative, but for Congress. The White House alone can't do this. We need to be working with Congress, and we need to be working with agencies directly. So we are working on compiling ideas and things that we can then advocate for next year. So would love to share that with folks. We definitely will share where people can sign up on the form that Nada mentioned. And just stay active and engaged. We don't want this to be a one pop and stop, right? This needs to be an ongoing, no matter who's in the administration, who's in Congress, that there is this increased focus an investment of actual dollars in women's health research. I think that's very important.
That's a huge point, especially going into an election year, right? To get the stickiness and get the staying power for this kind of buy-in. So yeah, thank you for bringing up that very important point. Netta, do you have any other last comments you'd like to make?
Yes, I mean, we there's always a lot of initiatives, right? And do they have the sticking power? For women, by women would be great. And the patient perspective, again, we're in healthcare. We're all patients, right? Just based on being women, full stop. Marissa spoke to it earlier. But incorporating the patient perspective and the patient voice throughout these efforts is going to be extremely critical. Patient perspective, patient reported outcomes, even one woman to one woman, we're not the same. Those are critical measures of how a product can work and if it's safe and effective, and is part of the considerations that come into play when we're evaluating medical devices, right? Or medical products, any kind of therapeutic products. So I think not forgetting that patient voice and how we can incorporate it accordingly. But if it's by women for women, we're already there at the table, so that's awesome. And I think it's like you said, it's just the start, and this all different stakeholders, all different voices matter to what Liz said, need to come to play to really help move the needle here. And then the big piece for me is translating that research into actual tools that physicians might be able to use, tools that patients can use, whatever the therapeutics are, is going to be critical in reducing that timeline as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yes, excellent point. I also want to add too that yes, there's by women and for women, but there's a whole lot of people that love us and that we love that are not all women too, right? I know that the people in my family and the men and whomever cares about the health of women are advocates and are really behind this effort too. So making this a health issue that happens to be disproportionately favored against women right now, and getting it into a translated human health issue and getting those discussions on the table. I'm excited about where that can go, certainly.
I couldn't agree more. I just say they wouldn't be here without us though, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
That's my little bias, but no, I 100% agree with you, Holly.
Yeah, I remind them every day that they wouldn't be here without us. Now, that's a whole different conversation. No, we're all in this together for sure. It takes all of us. Any last statements, Amanda, Marissa? I'd love to just make sure that everything that you would like to share is shared.
I'll just add, thank you, Holly. It's hard to know where to start in this conversation. It's so big. So thank you for pushing to start the dialogue here. I think when I look at just the number of folks that we've been able to touch, just trying to have this conversation, we know so many smart, determined people that can make stuff happen. So to Liz's point, let's just stay connected. I think collectively we can move this forward and drive change. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do to improve outcomes in a much, much, much needed area.
Yeah, without doubt. I'm amazed by the power of the connections and the outreach to incredibly busy, powerful executives like all four of you. Within a matter of minutes, hours, days, the spider of people who care about this effort and who are interested in seeing where we can help facilitate, take this, it's mind-bending, and it just really makes me incredibly excited to be part of this industry for just another huge reason. So I agree, Amanda, and thank you so much. Marissa, anything else you'd like to add?
I mean, I just have to say ditto to everything that was just said. And really, we have to work together. We need our advocates, our alliance partners. It also needs to be done government and private and public. So we need to bring in the philanthropy. We need to bring in the private companies. We need to bring in the public companies. We need to bring in maybe some companies that are not in the healthcare industry, to think of different new best practices and how it was done in a different, things were done very quickly in a different industry, how research was done. We just need to think, as Liz said, just put anything down, like out of the box, like think crazy on how we can move the research forward to eventually move the innovation forward. I know from a lot of us, we're really looking to see what the first few focus areas are going to be, because I understand that they're going to pick a few focus areas with the biggest impact. Amanda, Liz, you guys were saying that. So I'm super curious to see what those are. Every single possible health area will have a tremendous impact, but what's even the largest ones, through that, maybe it's menopause, maybe it's breast cancer, maybe it's, I don't, I'm not biased. I want to understand what that is.
Mhm.
And I think we also need to measure what happens immediately following that announcement on the innovation side, on the investment side, because that will be a very large indicator of where it's going to go for the next areas of indication. Because hopefully this is, like Nada said, this is not just one time. We're not just talking about this once. This isn't a one-time initiative. This is a continuation, regardless of who's in the White House and who's in Congress and who's in, any of these political positions. This continues no matter what. So we'd like to see kind of the spikes as they happen, so that we can just kind of, start understanding the trends on the external side when it's happening internally.
Mhm. Yes, and another obviously great point. And this is one that we need to follow, stay close to, and continue to move this forward. Liz made the great point of, look, we need to stay close to it in a few different areas. It's not exclusively a White House issue. Let's keep talking about it. This is such an incredible starting point, even for someone like me who's been in the industry for 25 years. I still know very little about the women's health space and the health of women and how we're all impacted differently. The more we know, the more we're going to care. So again, thank you all so much for being part of this discussion. I'm looking forward to continuing it and doing so and following this closely, and having another conversation sometime after the first of the year.
Thanks, Holly.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, audience. Live from 160 Studios. We appreciate you being here. I'm Holly Scott.